Sleeping Dogs is a 1977 released action thriller directed by Roger Donaldson.
Stars Sam Neill as a man named Smith, who at the start of the film is leaving his family due to his wife's infidelity. So he's got two kids with her, so he's leaving them behind. He drives off to look for, well, somewhere else to live. He spots an island, and in the nearby town he asks, who owns the island, whether there's a possibility that he could stay there. I mean, it happens to be owned by a local Maori who agreed to let him live there. Initially unrelated, there's sort of political unrest going on in the country, lots of strikes by unions, and the government almost stoking the flames of this sort of uprising that's happening. We see some guys in masks opening fire on some soldiers, but then it's revealed that one of them is sort of working for the other side. He goes and meets a guy, gets a big fat envelope of cash after dispatching his two mates. So it's obvious that from there that the government are obviously stoking the flames of this, so they can basically push through a referendum that allows them to sort of take more harsh action against these people. Initially, Smith is nothing to do with this. He's on his little island. There's an explosion on the mainland, which he hears. And then, suddenly the police are coming for him on a little boat and come and arrest him. He finds himself then sort of reluctantly part of this resistance movement, and other characters that we have seen previously we find are also involved in various ways.
It's quite an interesting one, this one. I had not heard, I have heard of this film. It's Sam Neill, so it's Sam Neill's. It's his debut. I think he'd been in a feature film before this, but this is like his first starring role in a film. And he'd done a few things for TV in New Zealand before this as well. So I knew of it probably via him, and it's one that I've been aware of. Let's say a later film by Roger Donaldson. He made this one, then he made a film called Nutcase, and then he made a film Smash Palace, which is. I have seen that one, and that's got Bruno Lawrence in, who was in The Quiet Earth that we also covered on the channel. Because I was aware of that film, I was kind of aware of this one as well. But I had never seen this one. And when you mentioned, we should we could look at this one because it's currently on Amazon Prime, I thought, oh great, finally I get to watch this film. And I had known that it was, it's known to be quite. For one thing, it's quite well known in New Zealand because it really kick-started the New Zealand kind of a new wave of New Zealand cinema. There hadn't really been there had been films made in New Zealand prior to this one, but this one really kind of set a standard for new cinema. In Australia around this time, they also were having a kind of resurgence of films, and you kind of got your kind of exploitation films, but then you got your new wave, more artistic films like the likes of Peter Weir and Gillian Armstrong and people like that were coming along. And in New Zealand again, I think even less so had there been a cinema industry, a film industry before Sleeping Dogs. So I think this film is quite standout in New Zealand for that reason. But I really enjoyed it. But it's quite an odd one. It feels quite strange. It's quite. I found it quite a confusing film.
It doesn't really. There's a lot of sort of. It's almost like there's scenes missing where things that could be explained.
Yes.
but aren't. So the whole thing with the sort of the union strikes and the government fighting against that, etc. There's not a great deal of explanation as to exactly what is going on or why. When Smith first goes to the island, he's almost clean shaven, and then quite quickly he's got quite a large beard. So obviously a period of time is supposed to have passed. It kind of doesn't explain why that is, or what significance that has, or what exactly the hell is going on, basically. I think there's obviously vague references to a referendum. There's basically a speech by the Prime Minister which is shown on the TV, and he talks about we have this referendum, and you can tell you can give me a mandate to meet force with force. But then we don't really hear anything about it, the results or anything, until I think it's briefly mentioned. And then obviously there is this sort of special police force that's going around just rounding people up who they believe are a resistance as such. It doesn't go to very great lengths to sort of fill any of these gaps, and you just kind of. I guess for part of it you're pretty much following Sam Neill the whole time, apart from when it cuts to say the Prime Minister speaking or whatever. Most of the film is spent with his character, and of course he is completely unaware of what's going on. He's not really interested. He's gone to this island to just escape his family situation. We just kind of get swept up with him, so I guess it makes sense that we don't know what's going on. After he's arrested, he has no idea what he's supposed to have done or why. But then, we are, as an audience, we are pretty much kept in the dark for much of the film, the same as him, and he just happens along various characters and things that happen, but not a lot of time is spent explaining why.
This is a good point to point out that this actually is based on a book.
Yeah.
So it was based on a book by a New Zealand writer called C.K. Stead, or Stead, S-T-E-A-D, Christian Carlson Stead, and he wrote a book called Smith's Dream, which I haven't read, so I certainly can't talk about that. But when I was, like you say, when I was watching the film, there is that jump when he goes to the island, and then it kind of cuts away to something else, and then it cuts back to him, and he's got this big beard. And, I grow beards, and I know it takes me a good couple of months to grow a beard, as you do too. And I wondered, while I was watching that scene, I wonder if the book describes more about him actually living on that island. Because you don't really, throughout the film, although he himself is kind of clueless to, he's like an apolitical person, and he's not really aware as to what's going on to him, but at the same time there is the odd thing here and there that suggests maybe he's got something in his background that does kind of there's a really great sequence in this. Firstly, so there is a point that he gets captured, as you said in the introduction, and he's thrown into kind of a cell, and there's that whole sequence I found quite eerie. It's quite uncomfortable, it's quite claustrophobic, because you don't know what's going to come to him, and he suddenly hears people possibly being tortured in the distance, and there's screaming going on, and he's in this very dark place, and then he takes a pee up against the wall and things like that, and then after that he escapes, and I won't there is a kind of a slight chase as he escapes, but the way he escapes is I thought was quite inventive, almost to suggest there's something in his past that do you know what I mean?
Resourceful.
Yeah, he is quite resourceful in that way, but they never really explain that. The film was quite confusing, but to me, it felt like I was on the journey with him, because he too was very confused about his situation that he'd found himself in. And I think that worked for me. I read a few reviews where people were kind of giving this negative reviews because of its confusion, but I thought that helped in this case for me, that he was confused and I was just as confused as he was. And plus Sam Neill gives this incredibly kind of riveting performance.
Oh, definitely.
We know, Sam Neill's gone on to have a really great career. I mean, it wasn't this... there's a really interesting interview. So I found an interview there's a website called nzonscreen.com, and it's full of... There's like loads of little videos of films and short films and television programmes of New Zealand film. And I found a really interesting interview with Sam Neill, and there was one of Roger Donaldson. So Roger Donaldson found Sam Neill after watching... He was in a TV drama called Ashes, where he played a priest, and Roger Donaldson thought he was so convincing, he thought he was an actual priest, because the TV show itself had been filmed in a kind of documentary style. And I watched it myself, and he gives this incredible portrayal of being a priest. It's very realistic, and you watch that and you're like, wow, this guy, is clearly an actor here who could go on to do great things. And that's why he chose him for this, and I think he's excellent in this. And of course, Sam Neill did go on and has gone on to have an incredible career, and he's still around today. He's made some of my favourite films, and he's done so much different stuff as well. He's one of those actors that's so diverse.
And he's always watchable.
Always, yeah. And he's also, again, he's one of those actors, much like, obviously we have a lot of actors in Britain that have gone over to America. He's one of those actors who's gone to America, gone to Hollywood, but then consistently comes back to New Zealand, making, was it only a few years ago he was in, is it The Hunt for the Wilder People?
Hunt for the Wilder People, yeah, the Taika Waititi.
Which I've not seen. And in fact, there was...
brilliant.
I know, I need to see that. And in fact, there was I think Roger Donaldson himself said he really liked that film, and he said there are nods in that film to this film. I wouldn't know, because I haven't seen that film. But...
I guess it's obviously, there are parts, where he's out in the wilderness, in both films. Yeah, I guess a sort of survival nature of yeah. I haven't seen. I've only seen Wilder People once, and it was a while ago, so I'd have to watch it again. But yeah, I would say there are probably similarities, and they're quite different films, obviously. But
I think also he
yeah.
said that nod from the filmmakers of that was the fact that Sleeping Dogs is this kind of, beginning of modern New Zealand film, and people recognise Sleeping Dogs for being that one that opened it up for everyone else to come along and make films. And there have been some fantastic films in the last 40 years from New Zealand.
Just going back to Sam Neill, I mean, he's like you said, he's very diverse. I mean, in this, obviously, sort of plays sort of your everyman, and then in Jurassic Park, for example, obviously he's a bit of a scientist and the hero of the piece, shall we say? And then we spoke about Memoirs of an Invisible Man a few weeks ago, and he's obviously the villain in that. And then Wilder People, he's kind of a grumpy, reluctant hero. So it's lots of different. He can sort of turn his hand to anything. Event Horizon, for example, he starts off the good guy and then becomes the villain, effectively. So yeah, he's just, like I said, he's always fun to watch.
We should mention that there is another quite big actor in this one. That's Warren Oates. He pops up. Very weird. He doesn't have a lot to do. I found his whole... Because I'm a big fan of Warren Oates. He didn't make a huge amount of films in his career, but the ones that he was in were excellent. And he kind of pops up. So the US Army have kind of been drafted in to help with the situation, and he's like the captain of this group, of this platoon. And he is Warren Oates all over it. I think he looks. I think he had a bit of a problem with alcohol, and he seems like he's just drunk. He turns up. The first scene he climbs out of a jeep, and he's got a beer in one hand, and apparently he's got the script in his other hand.
Yes, I read that.
So he can kind of read his lines.
It's supposed to be a map to the hotel they're staying at, but
and it's
actually the script.
Yeah, he's one of those actors who's got this great presence. Apparently, Roger Donaldson wanted Jack Nicholson for the role, but couldn't get him because I think his agent thought low budget, no way.
Well, I think they were only offering him $5,000, and it wasn't enough. So
Warren Oates kind of said, you fly me to any exotic location and I'll be there. So,
they basically paid for a holiday for him to have after he'd finished filming.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. He's not there for long, but it's it's kind of an odd show for him.
Again, that's a part of the film which is not really explained at great length why this American platoon are there. I guess a lot of it probably has to do with budget, that they can't. There's only so much of this sort of revolution or whatever they can show. I guess you're just left sort of a bit bemused by it, the same as Sam Neill's character is. You're not 100% sure of what is happening all the time.
What I got from it was that it's an incredibly ambitious project for a first-time filmmaker. Again, like Sam Neill, this is Roger Donaldson's first feature film, and as I said before, this is the first New Zealand feature film to be made. So at that point, there was no film commission, there was no film council like we have in this country, and of course in America they have Hollywood, and other countries have their own film councils that put money into new films. At this point, New Zealand had none of that. So Roger Donaldson had to literally go out with his producer and fund this movie as best that they could. And they use the New Zealand military. There are fighter planes. There were helicopters that they were able to get for this film. So I think they just, they really kind of were almost kind of like guerrilla filmmakers going out and getting whatever they could. And it's a hell of a ambitious project for your first film, and it's really quite, although it's not a big budget, they've used their budget, they kind of used their budget to its maximum, I think. And there were some great kind of action moments in there, and I think it's a really interesting film for I think maybe that's why it resonates so greatly in New Zealand, is because not maybe for what the film is about, but more so what the film is, how it sits there in New Zealand film history. I think is quite interesting.
What I would say, some of it quite resonates today. Obviously this government appears to be quite sort of right wing and a little bit fascist. There's a few posters that you see around, and one of them which I think it says, it's got a picture of the Prime Minister, and then it says, "It's getting better," which is like just a fatuous, meaningless slogan, which doesn't really mean anything. We get a bit of that these days, don't we? Control the virus and things like that, which don't really mean anything. Elements of it are, quite relevant today, I think.
I think even then, because I think at the point their prime minister was it Robert Muldoon, who was kind of very right wing, and a lot of people did not like him, and so I think that was because I think he famously when he found out about the film, he was like, "What is this? I want to see it," and he actually had a private screening of the film set up so he could find out exactly what it was, because I think he was under the impression that maybe it was a bit anti him. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Both modern and what was going on back then as well. I enjoyed it. I thought it was intrigued. I was intrigued to watch it, and I found the film intriguing while I sat through it. And it's got this great central performance by Sam Neill.
Yeah, that's what really held it together for me was his performance. I think narratively it could have done with a little bit of more cohesion, shall we say, just to sort of guide me through it, so I knew a little bit more of what was going on and why things were happening. But yeah, I mean, Sam Neill's performance is certainly the glue that sticks it all together for me.
Like I mentioned before, you can see this on Arrow have it, but we actually watched it on Amazon Prime. I think I said at the beginning of the video, we both watched it on Amazon Prime. Neither of us have it on Blu-ray. I think I will go and pick it up. The Arrow release looks quite it's an Arrow release.
I mean, yeah, they've done a restoration job and everything on it, so. Even the version on Amazon Prime, for a film of its age and obviously of the low budget that it had, it looks really nice.
It looks really nice.
Definitely. Maybe check it out on there first, and then like John, if you do enjoy it, then you can seek out that Blu-ray and dive into the special features as well.
And that was Sleeping Dogs. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button over here, and don't forget to push that bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And join us next week for another video.